Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we, take a whole stack of information and really try to boil it down to what matters most for you. And today, we're jumping into a really dynamic and, well, incredibly rich part of the world, the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We've pulled together a really fascinating mix of sources. We've got everything from daily news updates right from the islands, official reports too, and some powerful historical stuff.
Right.
It gives us this unique snapshot, I think. It shows not just what's happening, but maybe how these islands are kind of a microcosm, a microcosm of the bigger challenges and, well, triumphs facing territories everywhere.
And our mission for you today, really, is to go quite a bit beyond just the headlines. We want to try and weave these different stories together, show the vibrant pulse, but also the ongoing challenges, and some really remarkable developments happening in the USVI. The goal, really, is to find those aha moments, the things that help you understand what's truly important and why it actually matters in the bigger picture. Things like self-determination, community resilience.
Absolutely. And the timing on this first piece, it really grounds us. Our sources are hitting right around July 3rd and 4th. And those dates, well, they carry some deep, deep significance in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
Echoes of history,
Oh, they absolutely do. Take this year's Emancipation Day celebration. It's held annually at the Emancipation Garden in St. Thomas.
Okay.
And it was just this vibrant testament to that living history. What really struck me, looking at the sources, was the theme this year.
What was it?
It was physical emancipation, 1848, cultural unity, self-determination, and mental emancipation in 2025.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not just looking back, right? It's like a living blueprint for modern activism. You could feel that energy described in the reports. It kicked off with a traditional Yoruba libation, spiritual offering, then the ringing of the Liberty Bell. Yeah. And music, the Junior All-Stars Steel Band, active participation in bambula, dancing and drumming, these traditional African-rooted forms. Lenise Mercer and Douglas Shanti McKay led that.
Sounds amazing.
Then you had soulful stuff from the Voices of Love Choir, powerful prayers from the Nyabingi Order of Rastafari drummers. There was even an open mic.
Oh, really? Community members?
Yeah, people like Rasa Maha, Shaquille Springer, and Basta 7. He performed a new song, actually, about Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso.
Interesting connection.
And just the vibe of the place, a record number of vendors apparently, selling everything from Udal Soups, that's Rastafarian vegan food, to local crafts, produce, just buzzing.
That vibrancy really comes through.
Yeah.
And to really get the depth of it, you have to connect it back to the history.
Exactly.
Our sources really detail the brutal reality. Yeah. 200 years of the transatlantic slave trade in what was the Danish West Indies. The whole economy built on sugar, built on the forced labor of enslaved Africans. Conditions were incredibly harsh.
Unimaginable.
But crucially, the sources also emphasize this spirit of resistance. It was constant, acts of defiance, big and small.
Right. Never extinguished.
And it all came to a head on July 3rd, 1848, in Frederiksted, St. Croix. An army of enslaved people, led by someone known as General Budo, they marched and demanded freedom from the Governor-General, Peter von Scholten. And faced with that determination, well, he relented, declared emancipation.
A pivotal moment.
Absolutely. But, and this is key, the struggle for real equality, for self-determination that went on long after 1848.
Yeah, the fight wasn't over. And what's so compelling here is how that deep history ties directly into something happening right now.
Okay.
Announced on Emancipation Day, deliberately, there's new bipartisan legislation. It aims to set up a congressional task force.
A task for what?
To examine voting rights for U.S. territories. Choosing that date, Emancipation Day, it just underscores this ongoing struggle for equal rights, connecting past and present.
That's a really powerful link. So this legislation, who's behind it?
It's co-sponsored by the Virgin Islands' own delegate to Congress, Stacey Plaskett, and Congressman James Moylan of Guam.
Okay, interesting pairing.
Yeah, and the task force itself would be 15 members, appointed from both the House and the Senate.
And their job?
Their mandate is to, quote, comprehensively study the barriers stopping over 3.5 million U.S. citizens in the territories from, well, fully participating in democracy.
Meaning voting for president.
Exactly. They can't vote for president, and they don't have full voting representation in Congress. That's the core issue.
Right.
And the proponents, they highlight this profound irony. It's something you hear again and again.
Which is?
The really high rate, disproportionately high, that people from the territory serve in the U.S. military.
Risking their lives.
Risking their lives, exactly. Yet they can't vote for their commander-in-chief. It's this fundamental paradox they want to shatter.
Yeah, that is a stark contrast.
So this bill, I mean, if it passes and the task force does its work, it could genuinely redefine what American citizenship looks like for millions. It aims to fix what they call one of the most significant inequities within American democracy.
And end this idea of second-class citizenship, just based on where you live.
Precisely. Just based on geography.
So is there a timeline for this task force?
Yeah, there is. They need to give a status update to Congress within 180 days. After the bill becomes law, and then a final detailed report with actual recommendations within 1 year.
So pretty quick turnaround, relatively speaking. So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, it means this legislation is tackling a really long-standing issue of political inequality head-on. It could pave the way for full inclusion, really expand what citizenship means.
Yeah, definitely want to watch. And just quickly before we shift gears, the sources also mentioned another related national political thing.
Okay.
A federal judge blocked the Trump administration's move to end temporary legal status for many Haitians.
Oh, right. TPS.
Exactly. TPS affects over 100,000 people. The judge found the reason for ending it was, quote, pretextual.
Meaning not the real reason.
Basically, yeah. Based on a false or misleading reason. Just another angle on legal status and government decisions affecting large groups.
Okay. So from those big picture political rights and historical moments, let's zoom in a bit. Look at the more immediate ground level stuff communities are dealing with.
Right.
Starting with, well, challenges around public safety, the legal system. Our sources detail a pretty significant recent case out of St. Croix. The sentencing of Miguel A. Marrero, 53 years old. He got over 22 years in prison.
For what exactly?
For a violent shooting back in July 2024. Happened at the Candido Guadalupe Terrace housing community. He shot and wounded a woman and her minor daughter.
Just awful. The details in the report were quite harrowing. It apparently started with some kind of physical fight between Marrero's son and a young girl.
Yeah.
Then it escalated, a heated argument with the girl's mother, who apparently struck Marrero. And his response was to pull out a gun. He shot the mother in the back, then shot her daughter twice in the leg and ankle as she tried to run away.
Terrible.
Yeah. The mother's injuries were so bad she had to be airlifted out for emergency medical care.
Wow. And the sentence reflects that severity.
It seems so. It combines consecutive federal and territorial charges. 15 years just for discharging the firearm during a violent crime, plus another 30 months because he was a felon already in possession of a firearm.
He had a prior conviction.
Yeah, a felony firearm conviction back in 2000. The report highlighted the collaboration between the Virgin Islands Police Department and Homeland Security investigations on this.
Okay.
But, this kind of case, it really makes you ask, beyond the sentence, what are the societal things contributing to these violent outbursts? And how can communities, foster better ways to resolve conflict before it gets to this point?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Moving beyond just reacting to preventing?
Yeah.
Did the sources offer any perspective on that, on community initiatives or anything?
The sources mostly focused on the specifics of this case, the crime, the investigation, the sentencing.
And the legal process.
Exactly. But the sheer violence of it definitely throws that bigger question about community safety and maybe underlying social issues into sharp relief. They do emphasize law enforcement vigilance, though.
Okay.
For instance, another case mentioned involves sentencing a young man, 25, from Puerto Rico. He got over 11 years in federal prison, smuggling a large amount of cocaine in the waters near St. Thomas.
Right. That's a persistent issue there, the location.
Yeah, exactly. The region is a known transshipment point for drugs heading to the U.S. mainland.
So lots of enforcement activity.
Seems like it. The report stressed the high level of vigilance, the collaboration between federal and local agencies trying to intercept these smuggling boats.
And the long sentences are meant as a deterrent.
A stern warning, yeah. That's the message.
Yeah.
But, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this kind of persistent problem, it raises questions, doesn't it?
About the root causes.
Yeah, about the root causes of this illicit economy. Are these interdictions and long sentences enough on their own? Or do we need a bigger focus on maybe the economic and social factors that push people into this kind of thing in the first place?
That's a really complex issue. Did the sources touch on those underlying factors at all? Or potential solutions beyond just enforcement?
Not deeply, no. They
Right.
really emphasize the success of the interdictions, the toughness of the sentences. They make it clear it's an ongoing battle requiring constant effort from multiple agencies.
Got it.
And just one other quick local legal note. Charges against Nadea Ains, 34, accused of first-degree assault after some kind of dispute over beach fees at Maggins Bay, allegedly struck a security guard, pulled a knife.
Okay. So definitely have a focus on safety and justice. But let's shift to community resilience. Infrastructure is key there, especially after storms. Our sources mention the Water and Power Authority, Kwapiawapa. Their board approved a big contract, right?
Yeah, $16 million contract with a company called Sekutu UIA. It's for storm debris removal in St. Thomas.
Debris removal,
Yeah.
still.
Well, it seems aimed at improving power reliability long term, getting rid of lingering debris that could affect lines, and generally making the infrastructure tougher for future storms. They plan to get it done in 18 months using FEMA funds.
Okay, so it's proactive, looking ahead.
Exactly, a
Right.
proactive step towards resilience.
That's vital in that region. Okay, let's unpack this next bit. How the islands are working to preserve their unique heritage while also adapting, and particularly using financial incentives for historic restoration. That sounds interesting.
It is. There's a great success story highlighted. The restoration of properties at 15 Main Street and 9 Wimmelskaft Gade in Charlotte Emily,
Okay.
done by a group called 15 and 9 Main. And it's one of the first projects there to get approved for the Federal Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program.
And what does that involve?
It's pretty substantial, a 20% federal income tax credit for rehabilitating historic buildings that produce income.
20% is significant. But you said one of the first.
Yeah.
What else can they leverage?
Right. This is where it gets really interesting for developers. In the Virgin Islands, they can actually stack benefits.
Back them. How?
They can also use the local Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority's Enterprise Zone program.
Oh, okay. So federal and local incentive?
Exactly. And when you combine them, it can potentially lead to something like a 40% return on investment just from the tax credits. Plus, they might get reduced gross receipts, taxes, property tax exemptions.
Wow, 40% based on credits alone. That really changes the calculation for restoring an old building, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It turns historic preservation from just, a worthy cause into a financially very attractive proposition for investors.
A win-win, potentially.
Could be. And there's even a rule allowing nonprofits to sell their tax credits to raise money for their projects.
That's clever.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is how these incentives create a really tangible way for the private sector to pour money into saving the unique architectural heritage of the Sephards. It drives economic activity and cultural conservation at the same time.
That's smart policy. And speaking of vibrant culture, the sources also gave us a taste of the St. John's Celebration Village.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, described its fifth day as a feast for the senses. They had a big reggae night, huge crowds, people enjoying music, sampling all sorts of local food from tons of vendors.
Sounds like a great time. And that celebration has some unique traditions, right? Like the breakfast.
Tell me about that.
Well, after the Jouvert festivities, the big pre-dawn street party that kicks off Carnival, they have this tradition of breakfast in the village.
Breakfast after partying all night.
Yeah. Serving traditional stuff like Johnny cakes, soups, long after the official music stops. It's this seamless blend, music, food, community. It's really a hallmark of the celebration there. Shows off the culture, builds community cohesion. It's a powerful thing.
Definitely sounds like it. Okay, quick shift to the weather now. Sources mention the July 4th outlook for the USVI in Puerto Rico.
Right, look like a weak tropical wave moving through. Expected to bring some scattered showers, nothing too major.
Okay. And after that, something about dust.
Ah, yes, the Saharan dust plume. A familiar sight, or maybe a familiar feel down there, expected to linger through the weekend?
Right, and that's a mixed blessing, isn't it?
It really is a double-edged sword. Good news. It can actually inhibit tropical storms from forming or getting stronger.
Okay, that's a plus during hurricane season.
Definitely. Bad news. It tanks the air quality and reduces visibility. So people with respiratory issues really need to take precautions when it rolls in.
So it's this constant cycle, this interplay of atmospheric forces shaping life there.
Exactly. A constant reminder.
Okay, let's wrap up with a look at service and collective responsibility. how Virgin Islanders contribute, maybe even far from home. Our sources picked up on a personal story. A retail specialist, seaman apprentice, Joel Govia. He's from St. Thomas.
Okay, and where's he serving?
On the USS Tripoli, an amphibious assault carrier out in the Pacific.
Wow. And his job, retail specialist, what does that involve on a ship like that?
It's actually pretty essential. He manages things like the ship's store, the barber shop, the laundry, all the retail and service stuff on board.
So crucial for morale, especially on long deployments, keeping the crew going.
Exactly. And the USS Tripoli itself, it's a major vessel.
Yeah.
An America-class amphibious assault ship supports Marine Corps operations.
Formidable. So service like that, it offers huge opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Skills, seeing the world.
Definitely. But the sources also hint at the other side, the significant sacrifice, being thousands of miles away from home and family.
Yeah, that's immense. And it does raise an important question, doesn't it? What kind of support systems are there for Virgin Islanders who serve both while they're in and maybe when they come back? Does the community do enough to recognize that sacrifice beyond just, saying thanks?
That's a really thoughtful point. Thinking about the support network and sticking with responsibility, but shifting locally now.
Yeah.
There's a policy change from the St. John's Regional Fire Department.
Yeah, what's changing?
They announced they're not going to issue their own specific fire ban advisories anymore.
So how do people know the fire risk then?
The new approach directs everyone to check the provincial online fire hazard map regularly.
Okay, so putting the onus on residents to stay informed?
Seems like it.
Yeah.
The map uses a color code system. Blue-green is low risk, yellow is high, orange is very high to extreme, and there are different restrictions on open fires and wood-burning appliances depending on the color.
Right. Makes sense. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, maybe the aim is to streamline how they communicate risk and encourage people to be more proactive themselves about fire safety.
Could be. A shift towards individual responsibility for staying informed about local conditions. It's a subtle change, but potentially significant in how people engage with safety info.
Yeah, interesting shift.
Well, what a range we've covered in this deep dive, seriously. From these deep historical roots of freedom struggles, the ongoing push for political rights, to community efforts on safety, preserving culture, then individual stories of service, and these shifts in collective responsibility.
Yeah, it's clear that each story, even the really specific ones, ties into these bigger themes, identity, resilience, progress.
Right.
And hopefully gathering all this gives you, the listener, those aha moments we talked about, because knowledge is, well, it's most valuable when you can understand it and maybe apply it, seeing how communities handle today and try to shape tomorrow.
So what does this all mean for you? Hopefully it means gaining a more, nuanced understanding. Yeah. Seeing the complex tapestry of life in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and maybe recognizing how these local stories, they often echo really universal themes. Human effort, the search for a better future, things that resonate everywhere.
Absolutely.
So we've looked at Emancipation Day's deep roots, the fight for voting rights that continues. We've seen communities tackling safety, holding on to heritage. We've seen individuals serving far away. As you think about all this, here's something to mull over. In what ways can really understanding history, the sacrifices, the wins, the losses of the past, how can that truly empower communities today to shape a more equitable, more resilient future? Not just in the USVI, but, anywhere.